Hi, we're less than a month away from Tides of Torment, and I just wanted to go over one of the biggest issues affecting High Elves at the moment. And it's not something that CA has actually directly addressed so far. So they've addressed some of the legendary lords having boring mechanics, and I believe they've addressed the tech tree and the influence system and all of those things. And don't get me wrong, a tech tree where all of your tech tree is locked behind having specific buildings is not good. But the main things that hold people back from playing High Elves above any of that is the fact that your armies look like this at pretty much the whole game. It's bows and spears, and if you're really lucky, it's bows and spears at the same time. And that pretty much persists for most of the campaign, because good late game High Elf armies is just better spear and better bow. And half of their heroes are locked up at tier 4, and I know the noble's down at tier 2, but it's in a building you don't necessarily want to go get. And even if you do, he's not exactly the most exciting hero. And you have to wait until all the way until tier 4 and 5 to get some of their really fun stuff. And that's not even talking about how long it takes to upgrade the technologies for them. So they need to work on that, because in the trailer, they've released a Merworm, which is likely going to be a tier 5 monster. They've released the big Ocean Spirit, which could probably be a tier 4, or maybe a tier 3, but that feels like it's too low. And then you have things like the Sky Cutter Artillery, which will probably join the other artillery in tier 3, or maybe it's too powerful and will be a tier 4. The only thing that could really be placed lower is the basic Sky Cutter, and then also the smaller Ocean Spirit unit. That could hopefully add a little bit of variety, but that doesn't feel like it's enough on its own. So they need to do a little bit of reorganizing. I know that in lore, the White Lions of Krace are this badass infantry that belongs in tier 5, but they've already lowered it, so they could fiddle with this around a little bit and just add a little bit more variety in this lower rank and this middle rank, because that is the main thing holding back, because most people only play a campaign for 30-40 turns. So people are just going to experience spears and bows, and it's not very fun. And that's not even talking about the fact that when you get to tier 5, your dragon princes are completely underwhelming. They lose to any other tier 5 cavalry, because at the end of the day, they don't have armor piercing, which is such a big deal for a late game cavalry. And let's not even talk about Swordmasters of Hoeth, who are also pretty underwhelming for what they should be. Because, you see, Empire has some of the same issues. Early game Empire is really terrible infantry, a few gun units, and then maybe an artillery piece if you're lucky, but let's not even talk about Empire mortars, they're terrible. But the good news is, first of all, their growth is really quick, and then second of all, when you get to those late stages, you get really fun thing. The artillery is busted, the steam tanks are busted, and all of those things that actually make it worthwhile. Here you get dragons, which are okay, and you get arcane phoenixes, so 2 kinds of flying monsters, and you get some better halberds, technically. There's not a lot going on up here. And now, adding the big monsters like they're going to add is going to be good for that endgame variety. But if nobody actually gets to the endgame because nobody's playing High Elves, because the early game is just bows and spears, and I know there are rangers here, but they don't actually matter, then nobody's actually going to get to that late game, and nobody's going to be enjoying High Elves, because overall, High Elves are a powerful race. They're just a little boring to play. A High Elf late game army plays the same way as a High Elf early game army. And that's where some of the best factions in the game really show off that difference. Something like dwarves. Near tier 3 to 2, dwarves can run ranger stacks, they can run slayers, they can run gyrocopters, they can run artillery and infantry. They have a large variety in gameplay. And that's all considering that they're all different kinds of short midgets in armor is actually kind of good. They also have flamethrowers and trollhammer torpedoes. They have a lot of variety. And that's not saying anything in regards to some of their late game units, such as Thunderbarges. And that's something that needs to be brought to more factions, because nobody wants to be playing with the same 2 to 3 units every campaign. And if they can fix that one issue, it will go a long way towards making High Elves much more playable, and then obviously will make them a lot more sales, so it's a win-win for everyone. My big concern for the High Elves update is that they're going to take the wrong lessons out of the Guild rework, and they're going to apply that over to the High Elves, where they took a legendary lord who was fun and actually in a complicated situation was actually a very fun campaign, but he was a little bland. And what they did instead is they just made him incredibly busted. They gave him a very safe starting location where you basically have no one to threaten you all the way down here. And you just engage with his completely overpowered mechanics and you just crush everyone. And that is a little boring. There is a reason why Balthasar Gelt, especially New Malt Balthasar Gelt, is not people's favorite campaign. And I'm hoping that CA doesn't just make Teclis and Tyrion completely busted that they have no challenge, especially Teclis, because I'm worried that Teclis will basically do the same thing as Gelt. And that would be really unfortunate. They need to make the gameplay variety better. They need to be the actual fundamental mechanics have more variety and not necessarily just make them ball-bustingly overpowered, because that's no fun for anyone except for maybe one game where you just play as a wizard stack and you just delete the entire world. I'm really hoping they don't do that. But it seems possible, especially with their statements that Teclis is going to be more powerful than Gelt, that they're just going to resort to doing that. And that would be very sad. Thanks for listening. What would you like to see in Tides of Torment? What are you hoping for? Feel free to leave a message.